And that's what alchemy is. I think you use the past and take the learning experiences of it, piecing together past things, hoping that I can make them beautiful in my own way. Kintsugi, I think, is the Japanese term where they take this pottery that's cracked and broken, and they end up piecing it back together and making it beautiful, and you can use it again. It's all useful. And I think a lot of the things for me, when it comes back to trauma and the pain that lingers, is that you start to feel useless because you've become everything the trauma has told you are. And it's not something that gets fixed up in a day, or sometimes not even years. It takes, and not even a couple of years. It could be 10 years, 15 years. So you come to that place of the pieces are now glued together. One piece is glued together. I need more. Music, I think, was a lot of the glue. I didn't necessarily voice a lot of these things growing up, but as I got older, I started to pour my thoughts of things that I had left on the shelf into the music. And little by little, different pieces were put together until it became an understanding. And I think in understanding, you then find some healing and some peace.
Are you comfortable talking about, just in terms of some of the identity issues you talked about, like what understanding did you come to?
I lived between two worlds. I remember we moved to Nassau, Bahamas, and we lived there for 5 years. This is one of the first times where I experienced and knew that I was also not going to fit into necessarily the black Bahamian space either. I wasn't in the white space, I wasn't in the black space. Talked too proper, and I was too dark as well. They always made fun of my skin color, even the Bahamian kids. And I just felt like I didn't know who I was then. And the process of kind of coming to an understanding was when I sought out a lot of the different things of my life. So I connected again with my sister in Liberia. I remember I just wanted to ask some questions about the beginning of my life and just tell me things about my mother and different things. And I started to piece together some of the different things of my story. And I think for me, that was what started to heal some broken pieces of my life, was just finding out different things of my history. And I always point on this a lot when I talk to people, is because that's really what it was. It was the not knowing came from me understanding that I wasn't necessarily, my life didn't necessarily start in America. I didn't start being in this family. And so I was always destined to kind of be lost without a tethering. And finding more about where I had come from started to build a healing process for me that way.
That concept of destined to be lost, I guess in terms of your experience, does one embrace that there's being lost is, there can be a freedom in that, or a certain, again, kind of self-understanding, or is the goal then to be like, the goal is to get me not lost?
Yeah, I think we're all lost for some time, or at least like seasons of our life. I think like you can come back to being lost at any time. I don't think you're ever truly like set in a foundation of being found, because I think a lot of life is just a search for, one, belonging, and two, your history. It's the two things are kind of tandem and together. And I mean, I would say right now in my life, personally, I'm probably the most secure I've ever been, because I think the studying of, the things that had happened and then using them to strengthen me in the areas that I am in now. And that's what alchemy is. I think you use the past and take the learning experiences of it. Not all of it. I don't think you need to take everything with you, and at some point you got to bury it, right? And I think that's a part of alchemy. At some point you get to a place along the journey where you can lay a lot of that into the grave and stop grave robbing yourself and pulling them back out. I hope I get there, but still I'm piecing together past things, hoping that I can make them beautiful in my own way. And there's a lot of strength that comes from that as people see it. And also not being afraid to wear the cracks. That's why that bowl in Kintsugi is you still see the cracks. People see, oh, he's come through, or she's come through things, or they come through things. I can too. That's the hope.
Yeah, it's interesting, the seeing the cracks and the burying, because one of the things that I always, I don't know, at least with people I work with, I try to encourage them is more along the lines of you'll always see the cracks and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that, because I worry sometimes that people want to bury in a way that it's sort of like, well, let's take a different kind of experience, like when someone loses someone close to them. You know, you think like, okay, there's a mourning period, and then it comes up again, and people are like, oh, well, I thought you got over that, which would be a horrible thing to say, but people still say it. And it's like, it just doesn't kind of work that way. And so I'm kind of curious, because seeing the cracks model makes a lot of sense to me.
Right.
Tell me about the burying and the grave robbing, because to me that doesn't go together as much, because I guess to me it never really gets buried in the classic sense, because it always kind of gets like reprocessed to some degree.
And maybe that's better wording. I mean, maybe what you're saying makes more sense. I mean, to me, the way I look at it is, at some point I have pulled maybe certain nutrients from the difficult periods of my life, and the things that I can let lie, as in maybe it's forgiveness is what that is, where you can let those things, you're done with certain aspects, and maybe and you can't pull goodness from, is the way I look at it. Maybe there's just nothing that you can gain from that.
Nutrients. Yeah, you know what? I really like that nutrients, because not to overdo it, but when you think about the food, some foods are pure nutrients.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But most foods have, like some, and then some that the parts of it are not so good.
Yeah.
And so the idea that you're kind of taking the nutrients from these different experiences and maybe saying the parts that are not necessarily instructive.
Yes.
Or not necessarily, like, for example, I think a lot of people blame themselves for traumas that you just really have to bend your mind in 17 different ways to kind of justify how much guilt someone has.
Exactly. And guilt's a big one that you can lay down.
Right. It's like, what's the nutrient from the guilt? And sometimes what I'll say to people, and tell me if this feels right, is that part of the reason why the guilt may be around is because people haven't pulled the nutrient yet. They haven't thought to themselves, like, okay, what can I take away from this experience? As an example, like something that I would naturally say to someone is like, well, have you taken the nutrient of how strong you were to survive that?
Exactly.
Have you taken the nutrient of the grace for how many things were difficult for you to navigate because of that? And sometimes people hold on to the guilt. I guess my hope is, maybe it's too wishful, but that they hold on to the guilt because they haven't gone through the nutrient process yet. And that if you can, and you can say, look, I wish I could have some sense of a just world where I had some control in this, but it wasn't my fault that my country had a civil war.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. I got to let that one go.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. And it wasn't my fault that I was even picked out of my siblings. And that was guilt that I carried for a long time, was why was I chosen to be adopted, to come to the States, to have an opportunity to make something out of this experience that was terrible. I mean, my family's still there in Liberia. I'm not saying it's not the same as it was, but it's still very difficult for them. They don't live half the life I live out here in the States. And it's still really heavy when I think about it, but like you said, I think taking that part out of it for me, where I didn't have a choice in that, but I can still use this opportunity, give back to them, help as much as I can. That's a nutrient piece right there from a situation I had no control over, but you make something beautiful out of that, hopefully for another person as well.